This video is sponsored by Mubi, a curated streaming service showing exceptional films from around the globe. Get a whole month free at mubi.com/skipintro.
Speaking on petty, like when I watched that show, I was like so jealous.
Donald, no.
I was like,
I'm jealous of you every day.
But that's what I'm saying, in a good way. That's how I knew it was good. Anytime I'm like, sometimes I watch something that's like good, but I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't have done that. That's not. I'm like watching. I'm like, I was so jealous because I was like, this is a good show. And it's hard to do that on network television.
Very hard.
That's what I'm saying. That's hard to do.
That's Donald Glover, creator of one of the most critically acclaimed and experimental shows of the past decade, Atlanta, talking to Quinta Brunson about being jealous of her network sitcom, Abbott Elementary. And that's not the only time Glover's lavished praise on Abbott. He named it as one of his 2 favorite shows in 2022 while wearing a diaper, football pads, angel wings, and walking around on crutches. My point is, Abbott is not the kind of show I would have expected an artiste like Donald Glover to love. I mean, this is a guy who left one of the most critically acclaimed and cult classic network sitcoms in Community to make his own avant-garde surrealist comedy.
I want this wing of the museum to be dedicated to great fathers. My father, Joe Jackson, Marvin Gaye Sr., Tiger Woods' father, Serena Williams' father, the father that drops off Emilio Estevez in the Breakfast Club.
And Abbott Elementary is decidedly not that. Structurally, the show is kind of a throwback, dusting off the mockumentary format that was everywhere in the late 2000s, in shows like The Office, Parks and Rec, and Modern Family.
What y'all think about this little film crew I brought in here?
Distracting, makes our jobs harder.
But exciting. We about to be on TV.
Because they are covering underfunded, poorly managed public schools in America.
No press is bad press, Barb. Look at Mel Gibson, still thriving. Daddy's home too? Hilarious!
And in another departure from some of the most critically acclaimed comedies of the recent past, Abbott is joyful, first and foremost. While it tells the story of teachers at an inner-city elementary school in Philadelphia, focusing on the obstacles they face and the thankless but vital work they do, it's not focused so much on confronting our inner demons and dealing with the unbearable weight of living as such a flawed and damaged individual. It's a workplace sitcom.
What is that? What are you eating?
Why don't you just leave me and my boiled chicken sandwich alone?
Oh, boiled. That's the worst way to cook it, man.
Oh, I'm sorry. I could salt it. You know what? I'm not going to explain anything to y'all, okay? I'm a grown-ass man.
Oh, I think we broke that boy.
But this sitcom has achieved critical and commercial success faster than most. The first season was nominated for 5 Emmy Awards, winning 2, and the Valentine's Day episode of the second season had a massive audience of 7.4 million viewers in the first week of its release. For reference, the best performing episode of Atlanta in that same metric is its pilot episode, at less than a 1/7 the size. This kind of rapid success rarely happens for sitcoms, especially network ones, where so much of the comedy is based on timing and cast chemistry. Mike Schur, the creator of both The Office and Parks and Rec, has noted in interviews that the first season of a sitcom is often just about finding the rhythm of a show, which is one reason why both of those shows took some time to catch on. Yet, Abbott already has its share of laugh-out-loud moments built on the incredible chemistry of its cast.
So this Zach, he lives with you?
Yeah, he just moved in last month.
And that's going well?
Yep. He's so great.
So he knew you and was like, more.
Well, I think he sounds like a really neat guy, right?
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, there's my guy.
Black?
It's actually pronounced Zach.
And while Abbott Elementary is a comedy first and foremost, it's more than that. Yeah, more. I'd go so far as to say that Abbott Elementary is a miracle. A miracle! I'm reading it back now, and that might be a bit extreme, but it's very impressive. It's a show written by and starring Black creators that has somehow avoided getting tagged with that Black show label that would keep it siloed away from massive audiences.
Because they either let you be first or last.
Right.
Like you're either
Exactly.
you're either living single.
Yep.
You know, where somebody be like, that's a good idea.
It's so
We'll
true.
make friends. You know, like kind of
Yes.
thing. Or you're last where they're like, we tried it and you can now try it too. Like kind of thing.
I'd venture to guess some of this is due to creator Quinta Brunson's desire to step away from the racialized politics of some of her immediate contemporaries, like Fresh Off the Boat or Blackish, for example. She told the New York Times that while those shows are great, quote, "My generation was starting to get tired of race as the only focal point. The white shows got to just be white, but a lot of the shows with people of color were about the color of the people, and not about the stories of the people." But at the same time, Abbott is still possibly the most progressive show to ever air on a major network.
We all know how we have been taught to think about Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, but they were actually much more similar in their philosophies by the end of their lives than they were at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, people said they didn't get along, but that's not true.
Talk about it. Anybody else know anything about their real relationship?
They almost swapped philosophies towards the end.
Oh, for real?
For real.
If you can think of a more base network sitcom, let me know in the comments. Still, these moments are not the focal point of any episode, and ironically, I think that's actually what makes it such an effective communicator of its political ideas. It's a show that can reach a massive audience, represent the political and social realities of public education, and do so all without offending us sensitive whites.
Trust me, I am a young black girl asking a lot of old white people to just trust me. To be like, weirdly, I got you, old white people. Trust me. I don't want to got you, but I got you.
While Quinta Brunson might not want to dive into the nitty-gritty socio-political realities of public education on her show, I think that the show does a great job of portraying them without preaching about them, which is what I'm going to do here. I'm going to preach about the public education and stuff. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. At a time where public school teachers find themselves firmly in the crosshairs of moral panics like critical race theory and daring to have blue hair, I guess, I think Abbott Elementary might be the most important show on TV. So let's talk about what makes Abbott Elementary an incredible show, both as a sitcom and in the ways it can subtly affect change. We're giving Abbott the in-depth propaganda treatment today, but with a twist. I actually like Abbott Elementary. That's the twist. Let's look at what issues Abbott is making its audience aware of, and how its non-political approach might actually be the best for a massive audience. Brunson first rose to prominence in her viral Instagram videos of the mid-2010s, the girl who's never been on a nice date.
Can I get some Skittles, some dips, Reese's Pieces, pretzels, and a large popcorn?
A large? You got money. He got money. Get it all for him.
From there, she went on to become a content creator for BuzzFeed before acting in a number of shows, perhaps most notably in HBO's A Black Lady sketch show, where she gave us some kind of alternate reality version of her long-burn Abbott romance with Gregory.
You mad pretty, sis.
Now look, it's like Trayvonte Rhodes. Oh shit. This bird box, I may let you hit.
I bet.
It doesn't feel like Janine and Gregory, but it also feels very much like Janine and Gregory. Point is, Brunson brings serious comedy chops to the table. So why network TV? Most of the discourse about TV largely ignores the major networks, what with their procedurals and singing competitions. I just said that without looking it up, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. Network TV is pretty much just for cop shows, firefighter shows, cop shows, medical dramas, singing competitions, and also cop shows. Did I mention the cop shows? I wonder if anyone is looking into all these cop shows. The fact is, nobody thinks network sitcoms are cool. And if you disagree with me, here's a test. Which of these 4 network sitcoms for 2023 did I just make up? Is it Lopez vs. Lopez, Animal Control, Ghosts, or Welcome to Flatch? Enter your answers now. It was a trick question. They're all real, even Ghosts, which is just straight up ripping off the Knives Out poster right there. Because of the massive audiences that network sitcoms can reach, they tend to be lowest common denominator stuff. The more inoffensive, the better, which is why you end up with so many flaccid shows. Yes, flaccid is the word I'm going with. Leave it in. Making a good network sitcom is really hard work, but if you can pull it off, it offers the largest possible audience. As Brunson told the New York Times, quote, "If I go back home to my family in Philadelphia and I ask my mother, cousin, uncle, and niece if they're watching Succession, they're going to say no. Yet Succession is hip, cool, everyone writes about it. But it's not as if network television has gone anywhere. People online are constantly confused about how Young Sheldon is the most watched show. Shut up. Who is watching that? Most of America. Geez, wait until they find out about the 12 million people watching Blue Bloods every week.
I need you to get your cops in check.
Fine, as long as we can keep the criminals in check. You got a way to do both?
You have criminals in your ranks.
Boy. Regina, you need to get your head out of your ass.
Blue Bloods is a blight on society and should be shot into the sun. I made a video about it. So, what is it that elevates Abbott Elementary? How is it breaking through the mold? Well, again, and I cannot stress this enough, it's funny.
Oh no, I'm in. What we doing? Talking Risk, Rummy Cube, Taboo? Oh, I love board games. I play almost anything, but I don't with Settlers of Catan.
It's a snake!
Right on. Seize the day, Capitan.
Thanks for being here, Courtney. I think of you like a young me.
I think of you like an old me.
This ain't A Star is Born. I'll shut your tiny ass down.
Brunson is a self-proclaimed superfan of The Office, and the show's influence on Abbott is palpable. From every time Gregory jims the camera to the narcissistic bossing ways of Principal Ava.
Right, gifted program.
Yes.
You know, my sorority sisters are always bragging about how they have these smart kids they gave birth to. I could be like Charles Xavier with legs with hundreds of smart kids that I didn't give birth to, obviously. Go ahead and start your little mutant academy.
But it's not like there haven't been other shows that have tried to emulate The Office. It's one of the most iconic sitcoms of all time. So why has Abbott specifically broken through? I think that a lot of the show's success really does come down to the idea that it has something to say that feels fresh. First of all, let's talk about representation, specifically of a group that rarely gets any shine on TV as main characters. I am, of course, talking about teachers. Often TV that takes place in schools focuses on students. Think of all those soapy teen dramas where 30-year-olds are pretending to be going through puberty and having hormones and stuff. On the rare occasion that a teacher is given some shine, they fall into one of two categories. They're either impossibly noble, like Mr. Feeney in Boy Meets World or Tammy Taylor in Friday Night Lights, or they're terrible at their jobs, like everyone on Glee or whoever it is that's supposed to be watching the Euphoria kids. Where are the teachers? How has no one gotten called into the principal's office? Not to pull the where are the parents card, but do they not? Is this a charter? Is Euphoria a charter school?
Wait, is this a fucking play about us?
But Abbott focuses on its teachers and portrays them as people. Each has their own strengths and faults. Janine is extremely devoted to her students, but also a bit naive.
The more senior teachers are just used to giving in, but I, however, am young, sprightly, and know where they keep the ladder.
Oh, look at this. It was just a loose wire.
Gregory is super competent and organized, but in a way that sometimes ventures into obsession. Jacob Hill is a corny white liberal, but he's trying to understand his place in a larger system, aware of the fact that he is a white man teaching a predominantly black student body.
Is he using a cereal mascot to describe racial discrimination?
That's what he's doing.
Okay.
Melissa Chimenti forms strong bonds with children and also with the mob.
Hey, thank you so much. What's your name?
I got no name.
And while Barbara Howard might seem like your stereotypical perfect teacher, we see plenty of moments of vulnerability and peeks behind the curtain at the person behind that superhero.
You know it's okay to feel scared. You don't have to pretend that you're not. Pretending can make it harder. You know, sometimes Mrs. Howard gets scared and upset too. And that's okay. Okay?
This is all to say, opposed to valorizing or demonizing teachers, Abbott humanizes them. This might sound like a really minor thing, kind of like the bare minimum, but this kind of representation is actually something that is important in influencing public opinion. Most media stories about teachers tend to focus on heroic acts of valor or self-sacrifice. The teacher who spent their own money on supplies. But that genre of news story kinda has a sinister underbelly. As James Poniewozik of the New York Times writes, quote, "Part of the heartwarming narrative that we like to tell ourselves about education is that teachers are saints. It's convenient. You don't owe anything to a saint. The underfunded nature of American public schools is one of those things that we know about, but don't really ever dig into. So let's dig into it now. Believe me, I'm fun at parties. As you may already know, public schools in the United States are funded in large part through local taxes, and namely property taxes. At first blush, this might sound reasonable to you. You pay for the school your kids go to. After all, your parents probably moved to the suburbs for the good schools. But if you think about it for any longer than that, then you'll realize that this system means that poor neighborhoods are going to have less money for schools, which leads to those schools being worse, which limits economic opportunities for those kids, and leads to even less money in the future for those schools. It's a vicious cycle that we talked about briefly in my video on The Wire. The result is that schools across the United States have wildly different accessible funds, with the majority of schools being below the national spending average. As the Economic Policy Institute lays it out, quote, "Our current system for funding public schools shortchanges students, particularly low-income students. Education funding generally is inadequate and inequitable. It relies too heavily on state and local resources, particularly property tax revenues. The federal government plays a small and insufficient role. Funding levels vary widely across states, and high poverty districts get less funding per student than low poverty districts." You might also be surprised to find out that American cities are still segregated to a shocking degree. I mean, you probably shouldn't be surprised at this point, but maybe you are. I don't know. I'm just telling you this for the first time, and now you know. Low-income students just so happen to be disproportionately black and brown. So while this dynamic affects poverty-stricken districts everywhere, it's even more stark in communities of color. Don't believe me? Well, let's look at a map of Philadelphia, where Abbott Elementary takes place. The blue areas are majority white, green majority black, yellow majority Hispanic, and red majority Asian. And here are where the 8 highest paid administrators in the state are. And here's how those school district borders break down. Love a good map. Love a good, depressing map. Thanks for that quick trip down the Harris hole with me. Of those administrators, the only one in a non-white area is William Hite, the district superintendent of Philadelphia. He's paid $311,000 a year to oversee 202,538 students, give or take. It's a big job, but he's not the highest paid. That honor goes to Superintendent Amy Sichel up here in the white suburbs, who makes $319,000 per year, overseeing a grand total of 8,159 students.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
This is a small example indicative of a larger systemic issue. Philadelphia schools are physically collapsing, with the school district estimating over $4.5 billion of unmet infrastructure needs. In 2019, 11 predominantly black schools closed due to toxic conditions, including asbestos, lack of heat and ventilation, and lead in the school drinking water.
You know what? No, guys, it's not that great here. I mean, look, the ceilings are smooth. Isn't that what floors are for?
Because they don't have asbestos.
They cheaped out on asbestos.
I think this is one of the things that Abbott Elementary really nails, constantly showing the dilapidated state of the physical school and the way it interferes with learning.
All the first floor bathrooms are broken. Until reinforcements arrive, everyone has to use the upstairs bathroom. And I pray to the Mario brothers they hold.
How are we even supposed to teach? My first graders have never even been to the second floor before, and it takes me 45 seconds at a brisk pace to get all the way up there. It'll take the kids forever.
You time yourself going to the second floor?
You don't?
Oh, exterminators are expensive.
The grant money.
Yeah, I don't really think we got a choice.
No.
Oh, what in the immaculate reception? Oh.
Always something.
Well, Abbott's gonna Abbott.
But why are Philadelphia schools so underfunded? If you look at the conservative argument, which I did in research for this video, you'll hear a lot of, it's not how much money, it's how it's spent. But as it turns out, public school funding is actually pretty complicated. It's not fun. You try digging into municipal budgets and see how you like it. But I did find some pretty interesting stuff that I'm going to bet you've never heard before. A Skip Intro exclusive! According to the National Center for Education Statistics, Philadelphia actually ranked 3rd among major city school districts in revenue per pupil, at $22,612 in 2016, behind only Boston and New York City. That's good, right? That means that over $22,000 is being allocated to the district by the local and state government per student, which is well above the national average. The only problem is that only about half that money actually gets spent on the students. You see, there's a difference between revenue and expenditures. And in Philadelphia in 2016, expenditures were $11,396 per pupil. So what gives? Where's that money going? Well, as it turns out, Philadelphia schools don't get nearly a quarter of their funding until March, while payroll and charter school payments, must be paid regularly starting on July 1st. So as a result, the district has to borrow money just to pay its bills. And a lot of it. In 2022, the Philadelphia School Board authorized borrowing $500 million, which was actually $50 million less than the year before, so it's an improvement. As Dr. Eleni Shermer, a research associate with the Future of Finance Initiative at UCLA, lays it out to the New York Times, quote, "To keep the lights on, the School District of Philadelphia, like thousands of districts across the country, has increasingly turned to debt financing. They issue bonds to borrow money from financial markets, either with their own bonding authority or through municipal governments. Investment funds purchase these bonds, thus lending the funds to local governments or school districts, who promise to repay the loans, plus interest and issuance fees. To top it off, the severity of those fees and interest are determined by the district's credit score, which is based on existing property value and residential income." I'm sensing a feedback loop. In other words, borrowing is more expensive when you're poor and need the money, locking districts like Philadelphia into debt spirals. Again, this practice is inherently racist and classist, locking poor areas of color into poverty and poor education. And this isn't just a Philadelphia problem either. From Dr. Shermer again, quote, "In 2012, state and local governments across the country paid an estimated $3.8 billion just in bond issuance fees, more than twice the amount used to fund pre-K education across New York State in 2014. In 2021, the Philadelphia School District paid $311.5 million to service its debt. More than half, $162 million, went to Wall Street creditors as interest payments. The interest that creditors take from lending money to municipal governments is also, conveniently, tax exempt, rendering municipal bonds into a kind of onshore tax haven. Well, thank God Congress just condemned the horrors of woke socialism, because this capitalism thing is going quite well.
I gave her the money I was going to use for my student loan payment. President Joey B is going to cancel the rest of that debt, like, any day now.
Abbott Elementary doesn't go into all this detail, but I do think that it provides real human faces to the outcomes. This issue of underfunding is constantly bumped up against. It exists as a palpable obstacle in the show, but crucially, the show never feels like it's whining or preaching, even to the most skeptical viewer.
I'd say the main problem in the school district is, no money. The city says there isn't any, but they're doing a multi-million-dollar renovation to the Eagle Stadium down the street from here. But we just make do.
Instead, it shows people performing a Sisyphean task, doing their best with what they've got, while constantly emphasizing that they deserve better and more for their students.
Look what happens when the district offers us less than what we need. Melissa, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, Barb. See, we usually help each other out, and this time we went after each other like a bunch of peasants being tossed a single ham from a wagon.
Yeah, I was gonna say that we forgot we were a team, but that was beautiful too, I guess.
Remember when the district said they would get us a projector for every room and they sent one?
You're pretty good at sharing it, though.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, Janine, I need it back.
Okay.
Still, there are times when Abbott can get pretty direct. One topic that Abbott does get explicit about is that of charter schools, who have become a bit of a big bad in season 2.
If you have any respect for yourself or your neighborhood, you'll support legendary charter schools developed solely for your neighborhoods. Charter schools are how we can get good teachers the support they need. Yeah!
Legendary schools. I'm going to turn every school in Philadelphia into a legendary charter school. Next up, Abbott Elementary. Legendary school. Tell me that's not catchy. You can't.
Charter schools, if you aren't familiar, are privately owned and operated nonprofit schools that use public funding. Advocates of them argue that it offers a new choice to parents and students as an alternative to the woes of public education that we just laid out oh so well. Critics point to the fact that charters don't really perform better on average and take money from traditional public schools. And something I really respect Abbott for doing is presenting both sides of the charter school debate pretty accurately from all directions. They're not arguing against a straw man, and in fact, represent the appeal of charter schools in the context of flailing public infrastructure.
Are we positive we don't want to be a charter school? Because I don't give it so bad.
They don't even require all their teachers be certified.
Yet they take our funding, not to mention the private money from wealthy donors with ulterior motives.
Weird cash swirling around. Don't threaten me with a good time.
Oh, you know, not every student in the neighborhood could count on attending Abbott if we turned charter. Now, what if only half of these students got to come here next year?
Which half?
Now, not all charter schools are the same, but a lot of the issues Abbott raises are legitimate concerns. Charter school funding does come out of the public education budget. Taking that money out of public education can lead to teachers losing their jobs. Many charters do operate on a lottery system that can exclude students in a community, providing less coverage than the traditional public school system.
But imagine teaching at a school with the brightest kids from the neighborhood, and a bunch of other neighborhoods too, the cream of the crop from all over the city. They come to us.
Wait, but there can't be room for all of the neighborhood kids at Addington if you're accepting people from other places.
Well, we're all about focusing on the kids who have the best chance of making it out.
Out? Out of what?
But one thing that Abbott leaves unmentioned is the business of charter schools. While they are technically nonprofit, they often can be run by for-profit entities who receive all of the revenue generated by the school in a really gross loophole.
By law, charter schools must be nonprofit, but the schools can hire an educational management company, or EMO, to run the school, and the EMO can try to make a profit. Brennan calls his EMO White Hat Management.
Education is first, last, and always a business. If it's run like a business, it can be done profitably.
Thank you, Doug Dimmadome, owner of the Dimsdale Dimmadome. These charter schools can be bought and sold like business assets, and the results rarely benefit students. Charter schools can close without notice, and often try to cut costs by holding classes in even less safe conditions than those Philly public schools. From an investigation by the Orlando Sentinel, quote, private schools in Florida will collect nearly $1 billion in state-backed scholarships this year through a system so weakly regulated that some schools hire teachers without college degrees, hold classes in aging strip malls, and falsify fire safety and health records. In contrast with the way it simply portrays underfunding, Abbott Elementary definitely takes a side in this charter school debate, including a phenomenal scene where the parents berate legendary charter CEO at a school open house.
If your child becomes a student at legendary charter, you will...
Wait. My kid might not even get to go here?
We employ a lottery system to ensure equality.
Hold on. I play the lottery every single day, and I never win. This man is playing the Powerball with our kids.
The reality is, Legendary has resources, Abbott just does not.
Then why don't you spend that money on Abbott? Help us make this school better, since you care so much.
I think this is a great and important issue to explicitly take a stand on, especially in Pennsylvania, which has some truly horrific charter school conditions.
In Philadelphia alone, at least 10 executives or top administrators have pled guilty in the last decade to charges like fraud, misusing funds, and obstruction of justice, which may be why Philly Magazine advises parents, don't forget to Google any schools you're looking at to make sure they weren't once unexpectedly shut down or run by a CEO who pleaded guilty to theft.
I said it before, and I will say it again. Pennsylvania has the worst charter school law in the United States.
They also have the worst sports fans in the United States, but that's neither here nor there. While it does take a stand here, for the most part, Abbott's biggest political stance is simply existing. It generally doesn't draw attention to specific issues or pontificate about systemic racism, other than when it's laughing at Jacob.
Only way she could be cooler is if she were related to Angela. Not that I think all black people are related.
Well, maybe you do. Maybe that was your subconscious speaking. What would Angela Davis think?
When people think of representation on TV, they tend to think about race-blind casting. Think about all the different racial groups on Parks and Rec. It kind of exists in a post-racial world. I think there are merits to that approach, but I think that Abbott portrays a different kind of representation. As Brunson explained it, quote, the world of West Philadelphia is not a world that is struggling for black people. Black people are just there, and that is the world. I just watched a show recently where I'm seeing them plug in these people of color into the space. If we're not naturally there, I'm not really asking for you to plug random black people into your show so you feel like you filled your quota. Abbott is simply existing in black spaces and portraying what life in those spaces is like. And Philadelphia is a perfect location for the show.
It's a helpful teaching tool because these kids use these fonts all the time.
You're abandoning the phonics principle that these children need. This is a classroom, not a hoagie stand.
Oh, boom, hoagie.
While it is based there because that's where Brunson grew up, Philly is also the second largest black population in America, one that has been criminally segregated, neglected, and even bombed. Yeah, that's right. The Philadelphia police bombed and burned down over 2 city blocks in 1985, killing women and children and leaving 250 people homeless. Oh, and they put the remains of one of those victims in a museum afterwards, like a anthropological exhibit. Look up the move bombing when you get a chance. Abbott Elementary isn't going to tell you all that, but that's what I'm here for. Again, great at parties. Invite me sometime. But if Abbott Elementary isn't explaining all that context to you, laying out these arguments, how is it actually changing anyone's opinion? Okay, here's the part of the video where I start firing off some really hot, spicy takes. I think that spending money on public education is good. If you're a real skip intro enthusiast, then you may know that I'm all for defunding the police. And if you're not, you should subscribe and become one. If you want to learn more about those thoughts on the matter, boy, do I have a series for you. It's called Copaganda, and it's up in the corner right there. But you may be asking your screen, Mr. Skip, your introness, if you think policing is broken and that we should invest in alternatives instead, then why not defund public schools? After all, we're spending more on them than a lot of our peer nations, and we're doing even worse in tests and stuff. And I actually think this is an interesting question. But the main difference between the police and public education is that there is no real alternative to education, just like there isn't any real alternative to healthcare. It's a thing that people need. There are ways we can increase public safety without the police, by building up social safety nets and providing people with basic necessities that would keep them out of poverty and away from crime. But there isn't really a way to ensure the education of the public without publicly funding schools. Plus, while we know that police budgets have little to no correlation with crime rates, we do know that spending more money on public education year over year provides tangible results. A study from the Washington Center for Equitable Growth found that an increase in funds to low-income districts increased test scores. Quote, the achievement gap between students in high and low-income districts shrank by roughly 20%. By contrast, in states that saw no school funding reform, that gap didn't shrink at all. It grew. School funding is about more than just improving test scores, too. Another study from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that increasing funding by 10% over the 12 years a low-income student was in school made those students less likely to be poor as adults, increased graduation rates by 10 points, and led to a nearly 10% increase in low-income students' earnings as adults. And yeah, that makes sense. Increased funding allows schools to hire more teachers, reducing class sizes and providing more one-on-one time with students. It allows for infrastructure needs to be met, so that students don't have to fight over blankets during cold Philadelphia winters, a thing that actually happens in the richest country in the history of mankind. And Abbott Elementary depicts a lot of these issues. Ms. Chimenti is forced to teach 2 grades at the same time due to budget limitations.
You're gonna have a combined 2nd and 3rd grade class this year.
What?
Charter school up the street took all their 3rd graders with high test scores, and there aren't enough kids for another full 3rd grade class.
How many extra kids?
10.
I mean, great.
Broken windows and infrastructure make certain rooms almost unlivable.
You know, that's fine. Sweating is good for the students. It stimulates the brain.
And Ava is forced to beg the district for money to do the absolute bare minimum.
We've been taking appetizer money and giving these kids a charcuterie experience. Don't give us the money because we need it. Give it to us because everyone at Abbott deserves it.
All of this comes at a time when the national political conversation around teaching has never been more fraught. You may have heard of Florida's Don't Say Gay and Stop Woke Acts, which prevent teachers from even discussing or acknowledging sexual orientation, gender identity, race, or anything else that a parent might not like.
And it says, or age appropriate.
Yeah. So when is it age appropriate to talk about homosexuality?
It varies by the individual.
You would sue a teacher if they started talking to your daughter about same-sex marriage or LGBTQ issues at the age of 17?
If they don't have my consent and I think it's not appropriate for my daughter, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would be quite shocked to hear that.
Well,
because it's kind of a mainstream.
That is the law.
It's not just Florida either. In Iowa, 8th grade social studies teacher Greg Wickenkamp was told by his superintendent that saying slavery is wrong is an opinion that might not be protected under new legislation. In North Carolina, a high school teacher was forbidden to assign a chapter on Christopher Columbus from Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States because, quote, a parent wrote an email complaining that her white son had been made to feel guilty. Who is out there still claiming Christopher Columbus? Who's like, you come for Christopher Columbus, you're coming for me? This dynamic of grouchy parents is something that Abbott Elementary also discusses, although it does come at it from a different angle.
Paul and I were just discussing today's Black History lesson.
And I bet it was better considering Mr. Hill wasn't teaching it.
Oh, he was teaching it, and he's gonna continue to. Don't judge him by the color of his skin, but by the content of his class. Wow, I just made that up.
So you didn't listen to any of my concerns.
Why are you just now getting concerned? I found out in class that Jacob teaches about Black historical figures all year, not just February. Did you just start paying attention this month?
This censorship is just the tip of the spear in the conservative war on education. In Pennsylvania last November, Doug Mastriano, the Republican candidate for governor, ran on the platform of abolishing property taxes and, by design, completely defunding public education with no alternative funding mechanism. This is nothing new. In 1980, Ronald Reagan promised to end the Department of Education. In 2016, Donald Trump appointed Betsy DeVos as Secretary of Education precisely because she was an advocate and beneficiary of defunding public schools. Charter school programs, now predominantly proposed by conservatives, are part of a larger movement to privatize education entirely. Voucher programs have taken off across the country, especially in the wake of COVID and the culture wars surrounding education. In Arkansas, Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, wait, when the fuck did she become governor?
We have Sarah Huckabee Sanders. We are graced with Sarah's presence tonight. I have to say, I'm a little starstruck. I love you as Aunt Lydia on The Handmaid's Tale. Mike Pence, if you haven't seen it, you would love it.
Sorry. Anyways, Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders signed a law allowing the use of taxpayer-funded vouchers to be used for private religious schools, which is, not good. Private religious schools are not beholden to many state and federal regulations, including, things like the Americans with Disabilities Act, Title IX, or discrimination protections for LGBTQ students. As Bryn Tannehill writes for the New Republic, many private religious schools were actually funded in the wake of Brown v. Board of Education to opt out of that whole integration thing. From Tannehill, quote, they would have broad discretion to refuse to educate anyone who failed to do their homework, got into disciplinary trouble, struggled with technology, was not keeping up with the grade level, or literally any other reason that does not technically violate federal law in an effort to cut costs. Doug Mastriano hinted at this when he implied that it was not possible to educate some students because of their home lives, and that the state has no obligation to spend money trying to do so. One way that these policies are able to catch on is because American school districts remain heavily segregated. It becomes easy to other students and teachers from other districts. Because teachers are either demonized or valorized in news stories, they rarely are seen as humans deserving of respect or empathy. As a society, we simply do not appreciate or value the work that teachers do. And that's not just a conservative thing. I was struck by this quote from Evan McGarvey, a former teacher writing for Slate, where he talked about the lack of understanding from liberals. Quote, I wonder if that's at least partly why teaching often flummoxes entertainment executives and upper middle class audiences in the US. If teachers are smart, why are they making so little money? Ask a professional who makes six figures with no inherited wealth, would they want their child to go into teaching? Teaching pokes a pair of American wounds, never really being able to talk about social class and an inborn suspicion of intellectual people who don't want to maximize potential earnings. That's why you can trust me, because all of my videos are sponsored now. Maximizing my earnings. But Abbott is actually representing teachers and the communities they teach accurately, with compassion.
Losing the rug is a big deal. For primary classes, rugs are like a calming space for the kids. It's like a Xanax. Like a huge Xanax for kids to sit on.
It's hard to see teachers as evil when you're actually introduced to them as people, and it's hard to paint them as saints doing charity work the same way. They are passionate about this work, of course, but it's real work. It's not an art project. Some have argued that this kind of laughing about real systemic issues is a way of hand-waving them. As Valerie Strauss writes in the Washington Post in her article laying out the horrifying state of public education in this country, quote, "So what do? We watch Abbott Elementary and laugh." I've made a similar argument about Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but I think that this kind of consistent representation, while accurately portraying real systemic issues, can make a difference. We've seen it before. Studies have shown that the presence of gay characters in shows like Modern Family and Will and Grace reduced prejudice in the audience. And getting people to share compassion with teachers is better than having them do that with cops, I think. You know, cops kill people. The teachers don't kill anybody. By not lecturing to its massive audience or alienating sensitive little white snowflakes, and by simply representing life in a number of intersecting and underrepresented communities, teachers, majority black communities, and mystical janitors, Abbott Elementary is already making an impact. Laughter breeds empathy.
Wait, does that mean that you're like secretly Mormon?
No.
Oh, you should be, because you need more men. Can I get it?
Barbara.
I'm sorry, Janine, but that was actually very clever.
Film and TV are incredible empathy engines, and they can open our minds to different perspectives. And it's important to remember that the way American schools are isn't the way that they have to be. In that Evan McGarvey article from Slate, he mentions that the best depictions of teaching he's seen have come from European films. And I think that kind of outside perspective can really be helpful in helping us Americans deconstruct the mythologies about our own history. This is something that's done really well in America as Seen by a Frenchman, the 1960 documentary from director Francois Rottenbach. I don't speak French, I don't know what his name is. Over the course of 18 months, he traveled through the US, providing an outsider's perspective and creating one of the most important documentaries in the French New Wave movement, which is a thing that I have heard is both important and cool. French New Wave. And you can find that film and a lot of others on this video's sponsor, Mubi, a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from all around the globe. International films often can give a totally different perspective on usual conversations, whether that's Decision to Leave and its take on the detective story, or Playing Men and its exploration of masculinity across the globe. Both films I've recommended here before. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there is always something new to discover on Mubi. The hand-selected curation will take you across the globe, and I always find myself looking at the world a little differently afterwards. Plus, you get to brag to your friends about watching real cinema. You can try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/skipintro. That's mubi.com/skipintro for a whole month of great cinema for free. And thank you so much for watching. You can like the video, you can share the video, you can subscribe to the channel that the video is on. I also have a Patreon, and you can watch this video and other videos that I've made on Nebula. Nebula.tv/skipintro is a great way to do that. Yeah, Patreon's got stuff, and I have a second channel where I make videos that is only available for patrons right now. Patreon is a great way to help me do the long research that is necessary for these videos, because I read too much. I'm not a fast reader, and I read too much.